Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In today's episode, I'm talking to someone who's very special to me. Her name is Wendy Gillis. She is a marketing professor and a personal brand consultant, and also a comedian. In this episode, Wendy shares her career journey, which started on Madison Avenue in New York City. She used to work in advertising. She then moved to Florida and got her MBA and Doctor of Business Administration, eventually becoming a marketing professor. But after struggling for 10 years to figure out how to apply her academic knowledge of business and marketing to create her own personal side hustle, she enrolled in my program, Becoming an Academic Editor. She quickly realized that she, in fact, didn't want to become an editor. She shares in this episode how we worked together to figure out her niche and the services she would offer. Now, as a personal brand strategist and clean-cut comedian mom, Wendy is marrying her academic training, her advertising experience, and her passion for helping nonprofits into what is quickly becoming a very successful side hustle. In our conversation, we discuss the TV show Mad Men. We talk about the types of jokes that fly in Florida nursing homes. And most importantly, how Wendy is finding excitement and joy as she builds her business while staying in academia. If you get my sense of humor, I know you'll enjoy my conversation with Wendy. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. Hi, Wendy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's so great to see you. You were in, which cohort were you in? Was it January?
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it was
trying to remember myself because I know that January, March overlap a little bit, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you started at the very beginning of the year, and here we are almost July. And so it's been a couple months since we've caught up. So it's great to have you here to hear about how your business has grown since you wrapped up in our Becoming an Academic Editor cohort. So why don't we start off? You have had quite a journey in your career or careers. And so why don't we start off? Tell us about what you've done professionally over the years and how it's changed.
Sure. So I'll share this with you and your listeners, although it's I'm not quite sure who all I should share it with. I recently, in the mail, got an invitation to my 30-year college reunion. I'm like, oh my gosh, how's that possible? So what's interesting about that is I have been working for 30 years. I kind of realized that was really what that was saying, or that's maybe a way to look at it in terms of the bright side. But basically I graduated with a degree in liberal arts, and it was a psychology major, fine arts minor, concentration in communication, which I was told would probably be a good combination to then pursue a career in advertising. And I was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the time. And so I started at a small ad agency, which was a great way to wear a lot of different hats and understand what the agency's role even is. Didn't really know any of that until on the job. But I also had heard that if I really wanted to do anything in advertising, New York was only, an hour and a half train ride away. You really need to try and go and work on Madison Avenue. So I was able to do that about 2 years after graduation. And so I spent 7 years on Madison Avenue, which is kind of the mnemonic for the advertising agency business. It's kind of like how banking is, the mnemonic is Wall Street. For advertising, it's Madison Avenue. And quick aside, I don't know if any of your listeners have watched Mad Men, which is that television show that's cast or that's in the 1960s advertising agency scene. Well, Mad Men actually comes from Madison Avenue men, in terms of those that worked in the business at that time. So anyway, I went to New York and I worked really hard to find, I worked at a couple different agencies and was looking to work on big brands, particularly in CPG, consumer packaged goods. So I worked on Maxwell House Coffee. I worked on Post Cereals, which is Honey Bunches of Oats, shredded wheat, grape nuts. I worked on Post-it notes. I worked on Scotch Guard carpet protector, Jergens lotions. And I was kind of told at the time, if you really want to understand how to do marketing, work on a CPG, consumer packaged good, because, soap is soap. So if we can sell Ivory versus Dial, that's basically the key to marketing. At least that's what I was told back in the 1990s. So, I worked. So I loved that experience. It was great for me professionally. And that's what I, wanted from it. But after 7 years, was exhausted. Like, it is the city that never sleeps. And I just worked all the time. And I thought, this is not really a great long-term plan for me. There's got to be something else. And so actually my brother,
let me stop you before you go on to the next step. When you say you were working for these brands, were you writing ad copy?
So good question. No, actually my role was account executive. So that was the liaison between the ad agency and our clients. And so I was the one I wasn't Don Draper writing the, awesome TV commercials, but I was the liaison between the agency and the client. So I would meet with the clients and understand their needs and, figure out budget, and then go to the agency and provide direction and lead the team at the agency, and then go back to the client to present work and get it approved. That's what I did. So it was a lot of project management, actually. It was client relationships, project management, working with all different departments of the ad agency. So it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine work-life balance isn't really part of the equation there. But
Exactly.
Ever since I learned that you were in advertising, I've always thought you were a total badass. So I
Thanks.
thought that sounds so cool.
Oh, thanks. Well, it was, interesting, and what I really liked about it and how the business would kind of sell you on it was that no 2 days are the same. Like, you really don't know what you're going to get any given day, which is true, but that can be good and that can also not be good, especially, I was then in getting into my 30s, and I'm like, life is not just work. Like, it just can't be, and so anyway, I eventually moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and it was because I had gotten to know the area quite a bit because my brother was stationed here. He was a dentist in the Navy, and so he lived here. We're all from Pennsylvania. My parents are still there. But I got to know the area and really liked it. And I thought, I wonder if I could make the move from New York, to Jacksonville, and how that's for sure going to be very different and a new experience. But I didn't have any strings attached. I could do that. I was thinking, I'll just give it a try. And if I don't like it, I'll, move back to the Northeast. Well, anyway, and I know you've got some ties to Jacksonville as well. So moved in, I guess, right around when the Super Bowl was. So that was late 2004. The Super Bowl was like January of 2005. And I was actually not sure that I was worried, to be honest, professionally, if I would feel fulfilled, because I thought as much as it was a rat race and exhausting, I just kind of came from New York City working on Madison Avenue on these brands. Like, is anything going to be able to compare to that? Well, the good news for me is the advertising agency I was working at in Jacksonville had the accounts of Johnson & Johnson Vision Care, which was headquartered in Jacksonville and a part of Johnson & Johnson AccuView contact lenses. So I was thrilled to still be able to work on some big brands. And then I started to earn my MBA from University of Florida online at the same time, met my future husband, and all within a few years, got married, started the MBA, and then also found out I was going to have my first child while I was earning the MBA, which I don't know if I necessarily would have planned it that way because that was a pretty intense time period, but it worked out, so that was, I guess, 2010, and then finished the MBA, had my second child in 2012. Anyway, as soon as I got the MBA, I had heard, because I really was very much interested in teaching marketing. When I had gotten the MBA and kind of understood it from that academic perspective, and with my industry experience, I was like, I bet I could do this, where I could bring real world experience into the classroom, and it would be super interesting for me, super interesting for the students. So I did start doing that. So January 2013 is when I taught my first class, advertising management, as an adjunct. And it was at University of North Florida. And I spent a couple years, I think it was a couple, as adjunct. And then I was told, if you really want to do anything with this academic thing, you need to get a doctorate. And so Jacksonville University, had an inaugural cohort of the Doctor of Business Administration, a DBA, that was launching in 2014. And I got in on that inaugural cohort and then finished that degree in 2018. Anyway, when I kind of started the degree, I also started teaching at Jacksonville University, and really was there up until about 2022, I guess, I think. And now I'm back at UNF. So that's the reason I kind of mentioned that early on. But I have been able to use my industry experience in the classroom. And what I have, one of the things that was really tough for me when I was making that transition in terms of starting to teach, but still working in the ad agency, starting a family, is in the ad agency business, as exciting as it can be glamorous and it can be all those things, it is work around the clock. And I remember, lots of times in particular being put on new business pitches, which are so exciting and so fun. I mean, you're basically selling the agency, marketing the agency to clients to get that business. I was like, sign me up. I love it. I like public speaking. Put me out there in front. I love it. And then, more times than not, the new business pitch, as the agency was working on it, for sure, it's not regular hours. It's not even regular agency hours. It's around the clock. And I remember this one time in particular, a president of the agency got everyone together at like 5:00 and said, okay, let's meet and talk about the rest of the night. And I was like, this is after I had my first child, or maybe even my second. I don't remember. It was all a blur. Didn't sleep too much around that time. But I remember looking and thinking, no, this is when I have to go and pick them up from daycare. This is not, let's talk. And, I know tough on the agency because they just need all hands on deck. It takes as long as they take. They can't necessarily tell me, oh, these nights you're going to need to stay till 9 p.m. It just might be that you didn't get enough done that day, or direction change. That happened a lot, where you're going down this avenue for a campaign, and then we realize after we've gotten that far that we're going to now change course. So that means put the hours in because the business, presentation is the next day or within a few days. So that was really tough for me, in that I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I started to teach adjunct, very much liked it, didn't like the pay, but thought that it was really a good fit for me in terms of my skill set and what I like to do. And then the schedule, I really loved. I could count on it. But, that then led to a transition from working in advertising to working in academia. And that kind of turned into be its own little challenge, just in that I was adjunct for a while. I'm like only adjunct, and I couldn't get past that. I guess after I got the doctorate, I was no longer adjunct, but I was not tenure track. I was, I don't even remember what they called it, clinical faculty, something like that. So anyway, in the academic space, I started teaching just one course, advertising management, and then that just turned into all kinds of marketing courses. And I kind of realized as I was teaching them, yeah, I did this stuff real world. I can totally relate this to what happens out there in industry. And I really just enjoyed, learning from an academic perspective. It was advertising management, then it was services marketing, then it was principles of marketing, sales, market research, Now, I'm still teaching, as you mentioned. So I'm trying to kind of focus in more on digital marketing and social media marketing because I think it's so relevant to what students graduating from a college are going to need to do in industry. They know a lot of it already, but they're going to be expected to be able to do it and do it well going into the job market. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it went from, advertising to academia. And then, as we're talking about in this meeting, might be changing again, or kind of is changing a little bit again. So
yeah, and so when I started the Becoming an Academic Editor course a year ago, we're coming up on the anniversary now. I figured I would teach people how to become editors because that's what I did. But then when I got into it, I realized there were actually a lot of people who want to do coaching or some kind of something different, some kind of form of entrepreneurship that where they can use their teaching and their project management skills and those kinds of things, but applying it outside the academy. And so I started to open up the cohorts to be more about mainly editing, but also with a coaching component. And I think that's what drew you in, right? Or you were toying with the idea of editing at first, but tell us about what brought you to the program and what inspired you to start this business, and what exactly it is.
Sure. So I am a little bit, I'll call it unique, as far as what I'm doing, probably something I've been thinking about for a very long time. And I feel like just now I'm starting to really be able to do something with all of these interests that I've been thinking about for a while. But so I guess I'll say that while I had a lot of interests and things that I was thinking about, for a very long time, I kind of felt lost. And I say that in that, when I was trying to figure out what I might want to do as a business, or if I wanted to do something as a business, and why, I thought about, when I worked in industry and kind of again, there's positive and negative to industry, positive and negative to academia. But in industry, as the liaison between the agency and clients, I would pitch, I would, talk to prospective clients and talk about what the agency could do. And I thought, why then could I not, if I wanted to have more flexibility and still make use of my industry experience, just become like a marketing consultant that does that, that basically goes out and finds clients and does work for them and bills them and, all good things. And that actually probably was back when I was trying to figure out if I was going to do anything with the academia thing. Like that was in and around when I was finishing up my MBA and starting a family, because I realized, that the ad agency world was going to probably not be as easy with all of my family responsibilities. So I was just thinking about, kind of what are the type of things that I was interested in, and that I've done marketing. I worked on Madison Avenue. I've done it for all of these years. How is it that I can't just go and sell myself and start a business and be done with it? And oh my gosh, Paulina, that did not happen. It was so difficult to, build a client base, meet people. I was struggling with what was it that what was my value proposition? I teach this stuff in the classroom, but what was it that I contribute? What could I do for them? What problem could I solve? I was struggling with that. Meanwhile, I'm trying to talk to these prospects that I could do that for them. It was really stressful because I thought, how can this be that I have all of these, degrees and I've worked, at really great places learning how to do this, and I'm struggling so much. And so for me, fast forward to the past few years, I guess you're, like you said, it's been about a year that you've been doing your program. I look, on LinkedIn, just kind of seeing what different people are doing, and it kind of, will prompt you or show you some things that you might be interested in. And I came across your name and some of the things that you were doing. And what I really liked about it, and has proven to be such a great thing, is I'm like, oh, wow, this is an academic talking about starting a business. This is an academic who, as I learned more about you and everything, actually, kind of reminds me of my liberal arts days in terms of the type of things that she has taught. And she is launching her own business and doing marketing. And, I was a little bit like, again, why am I not able to do this? Because I should be able to. But then I think what it was for me is and I know I'm going to talk about, your network too, with regard to the academics and kind of the mindset that you're in, you were really able to tap into that where I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel like there was no plan. I didn't feel like it is just so random and just fragmented and so sporadic. And so to be honest, and I don't know if you'll want to hear this or not, but one of the things that I kind of compare and contrast between industry and academia is that academia, there's a plan. It's set, there's a schedule, there is a framework, and I love that about it. A lot of times there's that, and that what I'm referring to is, I love to have guest speakers in my classroom. But I got to tell you, like lots of times, the ones that are academics or were academics, they pretty much start the, talk with, this is what we're going to talk about. And then we're going to go over this. And then this is what we're going to finish up with. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, of course the students love that. And they're pretty much like, taking it in because it's all so very well prepared. But what's interesting and what I tell my students now is, by the way, do not get lazy and get used to that, because that is not the real world. Like you were just spoiled in academia, while you as a student lots of times are expected to be more passive than I think, they necessarily should be. It is all prepared for you. It is all kind of tied up with a bow. This is, how the course is going to work. This is what you do. Everything's figured out. Out there in the real world, everything is not figured out. And you have to kind of have those skills to work through it, to, figure things out for yourself. You're going to, want and need to do that for yourself, but your employers are going to expect it. So anyway, I found with your course, when I just kind of started to learn more about you and then taking the course, that you are exactly right. You, in my opinion, are not, an academic turned business owner necessarily teaching academics to be editors and or even coach. I feel that you are tapping into something that you are teaching academics who have historically thought that they couldn't possibly be thinking of starting a business, that they can, and here's how. You're laying the groundwork, you're providing a plan, you're helping us, feel not lost and that we're on our own, and your network. It's not just that you've got this great network of cohorts that, talk to each other. We talk to you, but then we also talk to each other. Your network is like exponential as far as I'm concerned, meaning I watch your podcast every week and I see who you talk to and I see what they bring to the table. And again, one of the things, I'll talk about my own business here in a minute, but one of the things that I have struggled with for years is digital marketing. And now, I'm in the classroom teaching it, which I'm thrilled to be able to have that opportunity. But I also don't want to feel like a poser or an imposter in terms of who am I to teach digital marketing when I don't even have any digital marketing for myself. So that too was something that I struggled with in terms of resources. What I would think, even how do you even build a website? How do you even get started? All of these questions I've had for years. And then when I finally kind of saw you, your presence pop up on my LinkedIn and that you might have some answers or at least could get us started, that's when I kind of started to pay attention and really do look at you as someone who is teaching entrepreneurship. Yes, maybe your niche or your target audience is academics. But again, we like that because it's like you speak in our language, you have lived through what we've lived through or are living through. And so it's that relatability. It's that we are now part of your network. We are now able to help each other because we've lived through some of the same type of things. So that is all to say, my business, I, through one of your contacts, one of the people that you had on your podcast, found Jessica Freeman, and she helped build my website, which is wendygillis.com. And she and I worked together. She, by the way, I'm going to give a shout out to her in that, phenomenal. And I'm also giving a shout out to you because she's part of your network. For me, you found her for me in terms of helping me with this thing that I struggled with for so long. She was not just able to design the site. She would ask a lot of the same questions that you did or frame it in a little bit different way for me, which it really just a light bulb went off, where she would say, well, what are you selling? And I said, well, I am a doctor and I have this many degrees and this many papers. And she, I don't care about any of that. I mean, she didn't say, like in a way that was like, you don't matter. She said, what she said to me is, we're going to bill you as consultant, comedian, I'll get to that in a minute, an educator. And then she said, but the educator, that's your job at the university. We're not trying to go out and get more, I don't think, until you tell me that we're going to try and, build a course or be a coach in a certain thing. We're not trying to sell that. That's kind of taken care of. We're trying to sell that we want, clients for things like your consultancy and comedy. And that just kind of, I even said to her, and you'll see it if you go to wendygillis.com, I was like, so we're not going to put doctor on the site? And she's kind of like, no, I don't think we are. She's like, I don't think we are. She's like, we're going to have a little bit in there in terms of things that you've done as an educator, and that can kind of help make you come across as a subject matter expert, that you know something about marketing, because the consultancy is doing marketing. And in particular, I've gotten really passionate about personal branding. And the reason for that too, my point is everything's kind of cross-pollinating with itself, which I love, meaning I am in front of the students talking to them about personal brand. I'm saying to them, when you go to the job market, you need to have an understanding of who it is that you are, and they are going to ask you, what can you contribute? And that is not just your LinkedIn profile, and that is not just your resume. Are they going to want to hang out with you? Are you going to want to hang out with them? What can you talk about in interviews or small talk that's really going to make you a little bit more multidimensional? And up until a few months ago, I would say this in the classroom. I would talk about personal branding. I would use the example of, so what does, wendygillis.com look like? And then I would tell them, don't look there because there's nothing there. I'm saying this, but that, is, again, feeling like a poser that I was not practicing what I preach. So now there is a wendygillis.com, and it does, like I said, cover consultant, comedian, and educator. And the consultancy is helping, anyone with their personal brand. But then, as Jess also explained to me, she's like, well, also education is kind of feeding itself. Consultancy really is actually also kind of feeding itself. But what you want to grow, what you want to procure is that comedy. And so that really is turning into my side hustle, Paulina, and that I do comedy. I do stand-up comedy, clean stand-up comedy, and it's growing. I'm getting booked a lot. I'm thrilled. I'm, trying to figure out where I can take this, and I'm doing it on the side as I'm also working, still at the university. But I will tell you this, of course, if I tell my students that I do comedy, they think it's cool. They're like, oh, that sounds like a really neat thing. But here's the thing that I use it for, and I am going to continue to do until it no longer makes sense. I use it as part of my personal brand. I said, that's great that you think that it's neat. That's great that you think that, it is, something that you don't always expect, particularly with a professor. Love that. But realize, I said, I want to talk to you though about it as a personal brand. We talk about the 4 Ps in marketing, which, is kind of a topic or a sub concept that's been around for a long time. But there is the.
Let me stop you there.
Sure.
I want to ask you about personal branding, because I think that's an interesting topic that you can share some helpful information on. Mm-hmm. Let me go back to what you were saying, because I think you said some important things that I want to pull out. You were talking about how when faculty teach in your courses, that they have this very clear schedule, the tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them thing, right? That we all learn as we're trying to figure out how to teach. And I just want to highlight that for anybody like you who, now you figured this out, but like when you were trying to figure out what else could I do as a business, I want to highlight for people who are considering that, how easy it can be to apply your teaching skills in the online marketplace, right? When I first learned, and it wasn't until like a couple of years ago that I first learned that people out in the world have these online courses, everything from how to play piano to how to cook, how to brew beer, how to run a business, how to become a business coach, whatever. Like it runs the gamut. And I think it really exploded during COVID, where people were at home and thinking about how can I start a business. But if you are a professor and you have created courses, you can create an online course and sell it. And it's exactly, I think, because of what you said, that we understand how to create a curriculum and then how to create individual lessons or lectures. Like we've done all that. It is no different than what you do in the classroom is no different than what you would do creating an online course or even like a group coaching program. I mean, that's how I created BAE. Was I thought, how would I teach this if I was teaching it in college? It's the same idea. So I think that's important to highlight that, people feel so nervous, or academics feel so nervous about going into business, but it really isn't that hard, right? At least creating the product of an online course. Do you agree with that, or?
I absolutely agree with that. And I'm, even now, one of the things I was going to talk about is how, so with the comedy, it's about writing the jokes and then performing the jokes, but that is just kind of making the donuts. Then I got to promote that I've got the donuts, And so that whole promotion piece doesn't feel supernatural lots of times, as far as recording the sets, putting them on social media, understand. But here's the thing too, I take your course and I listen to some of the things that you're saying. And again, what I've done as an academic, and it's all starting to work together or complement each other because, I'm just thinking about schedules and organizational skills and structure. And that is all so incredibly necessary, trying to build a business. Like those are great skills to have that are just going to make you that much better and that much stronger. And I guess, when I took your course and just talking to you and your network, you start at a place where, you are meeting people for the first time, but it doesn't feel like it because you've lived this life for so long and are used to, kind of conducting yourself in a certain way that it really feels like you can just kind of speed up the learning, get to a place where it's like, okay, well, we don't need to worry about introductions and awkwardness in the beginning. We can get straight to here's what we're going to do and here's how we're going to do it. And so I'm still, learning so much about digital. I know that you cover quite a bit of it in your courses, and I've taken notes, and then I'm thinking about how I can apply that to mostly my comedy, but maybe even my consultancy at some point. You talk about, who are you talking to? What problem do you solve? You talk about then how to reach them. And again, frame it in the editor space or maybe coaching space, but I'm using it for comedy, where it's like, yeah, email list. Yes, that's what I should do. Back when I was working at advertising agencies, we would figure out who our prospects were. Those are our contacts. We would send them information to, interest them. You talk about offers, you talk about, all of these things that I'm thrilled that it's transferable, that I am doing comedy and that might not be the norm, but I'm using a lot of the skills that I have, learned over the years, but then you really helped package it. You basically like kind of, in your course and kind of the things that you go through are able to provide that specific direction that academics love to do. And we, as academics or, what was to be, we're no longer academics. We still got that part of our DNA and that we, can appreciate it. And it's so helpful, like I really feel, I don't mean to turn this into, a Paulina ad, but you could, teach any entrepreneur because you've got, such strong organizational skills, a plan, a map, that I have, at least, when I tried to do it before, I didn't see anybody else doing this. And quite honestly, even since then, I've thought, well, you know what? Nothing against these other organizations that are out there that supposedly can help you with these type of things. But I'm sorry, nobody else has seemed to impress me so much. There's organizations that are helping with business plans and helping with different things in terms of entrepreneurs can do, like some of the things that you talk about, but they're just not as specific about it. They might talk about, well, what's your value proposition, but they don't go into who is your target audience? What problem do you solve? And then, kind of expand on that in terms of, is that something, whatever it is that you provide, is that even anything that anybody cares about or would pay for? And, lots of times the answer is yes, but then you help us figure out how to, build that in such a way that is engaging and compelling. And I don't know. I haven't found that anywhere else.
Well, I think it does help that when you're an academic and you live in the academic space, like we have our own language, like
Right.
we all have the same buzzwords and stuff. And then when you're in the business space, they have their own jargon and their own buzzwords and like lead magnets and, all this stuff. And
Right.
I had no idea what any of that meant. I didn't know what a value proposition was. I remember one of our college presidents when I was in Maryland talking about the college's value proposition. And I was like, what the heck is he talking about? What does that even mean? And I had to figure it out on my own because I didn't go to business school. I listened to podcasts when I was on my way to pick up my kids from school, and so I think that's what's helped is I can figure out what the heck they're saying in the business world and kind of translate it in more basic language for the academic, and then package it as a curriculum. But yeah, so you were talking about personal branding too. And I'm curious about that. You mentioned the 4 Ps, but like, what does it mean to you having gone on this journey and continuing this journey? What does it mean to you? What is a personal brand and how does somebody create one?
So great question. What it means to me is it kind of goes back to, what I was trying to teach my students or help them with in terms of what does PaulinaCosette.com look like? What does it look like? And, maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it won't exist as that type of URL. But thinking about it in terms of what might your homepage say? What might your child pages be to the homepage? What is it that you're going to put on there is very interesting to me because, and I am trying to kind of go back to some of these big brands that I worked on and some of the things that we would talk about with the clients that would make their brands better. And my clients would be brand managers. It was the brand manager of AccuView. And we would always be talking about what's best for AccuView, not only in terms of what AccuView can say that is compelling to the consumer, but how that's better than the competition. And, always thinking and paying attention to the consumer because their wants and needs can change and all that type of thing. So I really just kind of started to think about, of course, celebrities are a brand. Martha Stewart is a brand. But then I was like, wait a minute. I think every single one of us can be a brand, and I actually was in some training, an academic training, where she said every job seeker should have a website. And I thought, why every job seeker? Why not everyone? And that's also when I kind of started to think about, and I say this to my students because I could say to my students, lots of times the business curriculum is designed to have them graduate and work for a large organization, or that's what they'll do as a new graduate that's going to do something entry level. I did it. I get it. But I don't necessarily say, well, don't necessarily think that your personal brand or your personal brand that may also articulate a side hustle is to take the place of you working for that larger organization. But again, a side hustle by its very nature is you're doing it kind of at the same time. So sometimes it's what's WendyGillis.com. Sometimes it's like, well, what would WendyGillisComedy.com look like? Or WendyGillisConsultant.com look like? And the whole idea is I'm trying to think back to when I was a account executive working with my brand manager clients. This is really what I'm thinking is a brand manager of ourselves. So it's a personal brand manager. And that's just as important, if not more important, because we all, of course, when we're, applying for a job, like my graduates, my students, they need to be thinking about that type of thing when they're applying for a job. Same type of thing comes up when they're applying for a promotion. They're doing the same type of thing. What are they good at? What is the prospect, whether it's a supervisor or the company, what are they looking for? What can you contribute? What are you doing for them that's going to be better than anybody else? That type of thing. So it's really just become, something I've talked about with a lot of people as far as what is beyond the the resume, what is beyond the LinkedIn profile. And if you did build a website and you could think about what might be on there, what kind of videos might be on there? What, would you write about in terms of things that you're interested in that are your strengths that maybe are beyond just kind of, technical stuff or something that kind of sounds maybe not super, there are a lot of things that we need to do for jobs that might be skills that we have as far as certifications or that we're good at certain types of software, but who is the person, basically is what I'm trying to get at with the whole personal brand manager thing.
And so, over the last several months, I've kind of followed hearing updates from you about seeing how you are evolving or you're creating this personal brand for yourself. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, because I guess that's sort of the process we worked through in the course, right? Is you were trying to figure out, I have these interests, I have these skills, how do I combine them in a way that makes sense?
Yes.
And so it sounds like you have got this structure now where yourself as an educator is in the background. And over top of that, you kind of have these two other pieces of the puzzle, right? The comedy and the marketing consulting. Mm-hmm. So say more about how those work together and
Sure.
or how all three parts come together and for your business.
So for me, and again, working with others and listening to what I should do, because I have thoughts sometimes in terms of what I think makes sense. And then, you've talked a lot of too, and I'm taking your advice, Paulina, is when I have clients and I want to know what they're really thinking, give them a quick survey. It's anonymous that they can let you know what they liked and what they didn't like. And none of us like to hear criticism. We don't want to hear about something that we didn't do well, but it sure is helpful to know that, to be able to change or fix it before we might lose that client for the future, type of thing. So I've been doing a lot of that in terms of people that seem to like what I'm doing, trying to understand why, like what's working for them. I know it's working for me, but I want to understand what's working for, clients and that type of thing. So, the way it's working together right now is that you're right. Educators kind of in the background, and that's so far kind of taking care of itself. But I have been very much a believer in backup plans, in thinking about, what in our lives can we control versus what can we not control. And there seems to be a lot lately that we cannot control, and that scares me, and I don't like that. So when I think about what I'm doing with my business, I'm building it in that it is educator in the background, and that is all my pedigree. That is my, credentials. If I'm no longer at the university that I'm at right now, would I go to another university? I guess I could. But what I'm really trying to think about is with the consultancy and the comedian, if I could grow those or dial those up, kind of as I see fit, depending on what's going on in the environment. Meaning, like right now, the comedy is going very well, and I'm thrilled about it. So I'm really kind of trying to just take that where it leads me in terms of, I don't know, I'm not saying I'm going to be famous or anything like that, but I am starting to, I have a niche, among moms like my mom jokes, academics like my academic jokes. I've kind of tried to, I am apparently turning into a favorite at retirement communities and senior citizen homes, because I do have this clean comedy. It's not being a clown, it's being funny, but, kind of poking fun at life and certain things that someone that, it's been 30 years since I graduated from college is going to have a different perspective than someone who's much younger. And so anyway, all of those type of things, I'm thinking about, my marketing skills and strategy in terms of how to build the comedy. But, if things would change in the future, I really love right now that I could build up the consultancy if I wanted or needed to, because I know what I'm offering there, and I'm having a better idea of thinking about who my prospects would be for that and how to network with them, and using the same things you've taught us as far as email lists and, I've built the website now, and it would be very easy to just start a blog or a podcast, that could give more content on personal branding. And so right now, what I'm doing with the business is I'm trying to grow it, but also not bite off more than I can chew, not like kind of take on a ton of consultant clients. Meanwhile, I can't handle that with the, teaching at the university and then also trying to do the comedy. But if things shift outside of my control, I love that I could kind of dial up one or the other as I have control over, as I see fit. So that's kind of what I'm very interested in right now. I mean, like I said, the comedy's going well. Some of that's within my control, and that, I can write the jokes and feel good about them, and people, if they like what I'm doing, will hire me again. But some of that, maybe outside of my control, and I'm thinking about, I don't know, an environmental factor like a recession or something, and nobody has money for entertainment anymore, or I don't know what the case may be, but I'm basically trying to be nimble, trying to kind of have a side hustle, have a plan here that is malleable, that I can kind of do what I want when I want to do it. And it has been so exciting. It has been so interesting. It's taken advantage of my passions, even when I'm talking about, personal brand manager and that idea. And then I talk about it with my students. And then my project lots of times for my students that I'm having them do is, if you could have a side hustle, what would it be? And at the first day of class, they hate it. They're like, what are you talking about? I don't even know, what question you're asking, but much less what I could possibly answer. But then what I try to do is through the course say, no, I'm just asking you, like, if you like tennis, maybe think about starting a tennis facility. Not that you have to, but let's just pretend that you are. What, do you offer the prospective clients, and how is that going to be different than other people that are doing the same thing? And, who is your market? Who's your target audience? What are their wants and needs? And I love it because it's so interesting when all the different students are coming up with their own side hustle. They love it because it's relevant. And some of them even say, as soon as I graduate or at some point when I can kind of start and do this side hustle, I'm going to do this. It's applying the marketing that we've all learned on the job to, what they're learning in school. And so that I hope that I'm answering the question okay, but that's basically how all of my worlds are kind of working together. And I think it feels like they're strengthening each other, like it's something that is continuing to evolve. And I know we talked a little bit before, this whole marketing thing, this whole building a business thing, it is not, I call it, it's not a destination, it's a journey, and it's constantly evolving. And you've talked about this. And that was also really great for you to talk about, and that you're evolving. We're all evolving, and that's okay. I mean, that's good, actually. I guess I say that in that for the longest time, too, I felt like I had to have all the right answers. If I'm even going to go out there and try and say that I'm a business owner or start a business, I better come across kind of like we're talking academia, that you know it all, and I'm like, I realize I do not know it all, and that's okay. And that things are changing and evolving. And if I can kind of, evolve with it, that's kind of the name of the game. And so, yeah, to date here on June 26th, in terms of what I'm doing with this business, it's growing the comedy, and, very thankful for the educator, and the consultancy is also a part of that, and kind of the consultancy and the educator are kind of feeding themselves, but the comedy I'm trying to grow and really build something there, because it's not just what I was talking before about the 4 Ps. It's, of course, not just about the product, not just about making the donuts is what I'm calling it, and that it's the jokes and performing the jokes. It's them promoting that. And there's so much to think about in terms of promoting that. And again, though, I want to learn it, I want to know it, and I want to do it for the comedy, but then I want to bring that back into the classroom saying, this is how you do it. It's not just, there are some quotes in advertising that say, you could have the best product in the world, but the worst promotion. And if that's the case, you have the best product that nobody's going to know anything about. Or you could have the worst product and the best promotion, but that's also bad because that's the quickest way to go out of business. It's basically like having great advertising for something that when the consumer tries to go and buy it, it's not very good. And so I think about those type of things that I learned in advertising and how it relates to what I'm trying to do right now. And I'm fascinated, and I think it's so interesting, but it's not always easy. And it's for sure, I don't kind of be like, okay, well, fixed, everything's done. Business, launched, no worries at all. I don't even have to look at it anymore. No, it's something
that's such a great point, that we as academics feel like we have to have all the answers before we start. I think we're trained to gather all the data, to do all the research, to finish the analysis, and then write the paper. And there it is. That's the answer, And we're scared to put ourselves out there because we're so poised for criticism and rejection all the time. Mm-hmm. And I love that you said that the business world, or really just the world, but especially if you're running a business in the world, it's always changing. And you also mentioned earlier in a different context about how people's needs are always changing. People's interests are always changing. And I mean, that's happened for me just in the last year. When I launched the business, it was May, June, July of 2024. And the political landscape was a lot different than it is now. People wanted to leave academia just because they were burnt out and the work was unsustainable. And now I'm sensing a lot more pressure, where people are worried that their job might not exist in a few months, or we don't know what's going to happen next semester. And a lot more colleges are closing or cutting programs and things. So circumstances change. And I think that is an argument not only for being adaptable and flexible, but also for just starting, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you wait until you have all the answers, it's going to be too late because the landscape is going to be entirely different than what you prepared for. And so you kind of just have to jump in and learn as you go. As if you're treading water or something, and you just kind of figure it out. So I love hearing you think through all these different moving parts, because there are a lot of moving parts, but it sounds like you're having a lot of success with tying them together, and not just from a personal branding perspective and what you put out there, but also just in the context of your life, that your teaching is informing your business experience and your business experience is coming back to inform your teaching, which is so fantastic. And so with the consulting portion, and maybe you're still figuring this out, who do you think you want to work with? If you're going to consult on marketing, is it like a business to business or a business to consumer? Like how? Great question.
So I am still figuring that out. What has happened so far is through comedy, actually, and through other ways, nonprofits have actually kind of been something that has been of interest and that are interested in me. Nonprofits with me helping them with their marketing. Now, that's not necessarily a personal brand, but it's taking branding, skills and applying them to the nonprofit. But then lots of times people will come up to me at an individual level where I'll talk about my personal brand. And so, for example, I've been talking to a nonprofit that I'm going to help, with some of their, look at their strategic plan and help them with, figuring out a few things as far as who they should target, what problem are they solving, all these type of things. But then the, executive director of the nonprofit was like, you talk about this personal brand. Like, I wonder what my website would look like. And she's like, I would, pay you to help me understand what is my personal brand. And then I'll just be talking to friends and they'll, I have another colleague who is a professor who is talking about making a big move, not to industry, but from one school to the other. And he's been at this first school for a very long time and has been, wondering about this change. And then I'll just start to talk to him about personal brand in terms of, some of the things that he worries about in making that transition, or, he's talked to about that probably some of what he wants to do is write a book someday in terms of about his journey so far. And I'm like, those type of things, a book would be about what? And then I'll say, well, then, what would that look like on your website? Like, what would your personal brand be? Again, beyond the resume, beyond the LinkedIn profile. And so it is kind of still evolving. I think, to be honest, what I'd like to do with it is talk to more people on an individual level and help them do what I seem to have done, or what I am doing in terms of figuring out what my personal brand is. I get super excited about that. They get super excited about that. I don't know that there's, the thing is about business in terms of brands that are, reaching consumers, or even nonprofits trying to reach members, or nonprofits trying to reach, we don't have enough time for ourselves. It's kind of like, I gotta sell this in order to get, consumers to pay so that I can, pay my bills. Like, lots of times, ourselves as personal brands, while it sounds, like it could be something interesting, is it a nice to have versus a must have? And I would argue that it works as a must have because it can help you better understand, what you're doing with other things. Like for me, wendygillis.com is capturing so much of what I wanted to communicate with people for the longest time. And it's not just one thing. I'm not just stuck in a box. Lots of times the world likes to put us in silos, and we have to be, only in that lane, and we can't, work outside of it because people can't handle it. They can't, understand that I could be both a professor and a comedian, and, that can happen. Like they can both be true. And so that's kind of where I'd like to take it, more of a consultancy on an individual level, helping people figure out their personal brands. But, until that maybe, I don't know if that's as viable as helping businesses build their brands, which is also interesting. Particularly, I like nonprofits because they are helping, lots of times consumers that I really care about. So I feel like there's more there than just trying to make a buck, like what you might be the case with some for-profit brands. So I'm still kind of trying to figure a lot of that out. What also has happened, though, and this is not something I expected, but it's so super cool, Paulina. So I did a comedy show in May. It was called MomCom, where we were trying to find mom comedians that could put on a show celebrating Mother's Day. Well, what that turned into is, actually, why don't we do it where we could, host a comedy show that really serves also more as a charity, and we'll find a nonprofit that we could give proceeds to help give that nonprofit so that they could, have financial support for their cause. And so with MomCom, the nonprofit that we identified was Betty Griffin Center in Jacksonville that fights domestic violence. And so we had the show at a restaurant. And so the tickets were kind of pricey. They were $80 a ticket, but it included a 3 or 4 course meal plus comedy show. And by the way, you're, helping with a good cause, where we had we had to pay people, pay the comedians, pay the restaurant, but then the additional funds went to the nonprofit who was there to speak about what they're doing, was there to accept the check. And it was just, I was like that, because to me, that's me getting to do my comedy, something that I enjoy, but it's also for a great cause. And then for sure, a lot of that was kind of marketing in terms of, so who are we going to try and reach? What are we going to say? All of these things that we've been talking about as far as having a business and how do we market MomCom? How do we make sure that we get enough, tickets sold so that we will in fact have any type of proceeds to give this nonprofit that we say we're going to help? So that's kind of something that's, started to happen too. And then nonprofits are on my list in terms of prospects for the comedy, particularly the clean comedy. That's what I'm kind of hoping can be my niche. Clean comedy is, not using the bad words and talking about explicit content, which is who I am as a person, and also does help me to kind of, stay true to, I'm still a professional in terms of professor. I am a mom, like I'm a grown up. Like I don't need to or want to talk about some of these things that some of the particularly younger comedians talk about. But if you like, I kind of like PG-13 because it's really hard to be squeaky clean, which is what a lot of the senior citizen residential communities like, and some of the nonprofits. That's my challenge there, in terms of that, if I can be squeaky clean, or if I can keep it clean and maybe even do, events for corporations and that type of thing, still be funny, but don't have to, use bad language or anything like that, then that helps set me apart and then leads to other opportunities. So I don't know if that answered your question, but they are all working together, dovetailing in ways that I didn't even realize that they would.
I love that so much. I just love your whole journey so much, and I love how much fun you're having along the way. Every time we talk, you just are so excited and you just light up thinking about the progress that you've made and how much more is going to unfold, on this journey. Like, you don't have all the answers, but you're having fun figuring it out, and letting it all sort of unfold in its own time. And it's so fun to just follow along, and to watch you do this, because you're wonderful and you deserve this happiness so much. So
I so appreciate that, Paulina. And you had a huge role in my journey, because I know I talked about the structure and you come from academic world and you helped lay out the plan for us. But something that you did for me starting a business, and others have done for me, and some of the other things I'm doing in terms of comedy, is confidence. Like, that is such a huge piece of it. To your point, what you were talking before about, particularly as academics, we don't know how to start a business. It's not our wheelhouse. It's foreign. It's new. It's scary. But, your approach, as soon as I met you, as soon as I kind of, had some Zoom calls with you and then got into the course, that just speaks volumes, because there's enough scary things out there, that we as business owners and, particularly now, just trying to deal with what is out there in the world, that we might not always feel super confident about. You really help with that, and I know I'm not the only person to say that. So I appreciate your role in my excitement and what's going on with me.
That's great. I think we also get along because I have the quirky mom humor too, like the PG-13 quirky
Right.
Mom sense of humor. So that's great. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Was there any like one or two pieces of advice you have for anybody who's starting out, or anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Well, I was just going to say my two pieces of advice. Again, not to make it turn into a Paulina ad, but it's going to, because you're one of my favorite people. I've told you that a number of times. And I've like told you when I first started learning about what you're doing, I'm like, oh my goodness, so exciting. You are a marketer, whether you know it or not. Like, I know you told me, and you say, I don't even have a business degree. I didn't even go to school for that. I'm just like, well, then you know what? That's probably an ad against business school, because you're doing it and killing it. And, you even go through that process. So good for you. But I was going to maybe close with two tips. And then also, if anybody wants to talk, further, please feel free to contact me. But I would say take your course is my first tip, because going into it, I liked you and I liked where you were coming from, and particularly all those things that you used to say. I don't know if you still do. I haven't seen it lately. I think you do still do it. It's just not, for me at the time, it was like I felt seen, because you talked about some of the burnout and some of the frustration with what goes on in academia. Well, there is something else you can think about, whether it be starting your own business or that be a side hustle, let's talk more. And so all of those kind of prompts really, again, kind of resonated with me, where I'm like, oh my gosh, someone is out there talking about this. Like, that's tremendous. And then it's just, every time I've had contact with you, it's been that and so much more. And that once you get into the course, yes, I felt like, I might have even told you, I'm like, I don't know what business I might even want to start. So I'll go into this course, but I don't even know what I'm expecting and what I'm even asking for, because I don't know myself what I'm trying to do. But that was okay, not only were you very patient with us in terms of helping each of us figure that out, and that's part of the course, but there were others in the course that were going through the exact same thing. And so that became, I know that you have talked about the cohorts and then cross-pollinating between the cohorts, and that's true. But then I even feel my second piece of advice is to get anybody that's out there interested in any of this to connect with you and watch those podcasts every week and become part of your network. Not necessarily, when I say become part of a network, that almost makes me, when I'm listening to myself say that I want to be part of the network so that I get from your people. No, I want to be part of your network so that I meet all of your people, because that's where I found Jess Freeman, Jen Liddy, I listen to all of these people in terms of the type of things that they're doing. And it's inspiring. And they talk about, how they also don't have it all figured out. And they've also, stumbled or have challenges that some have overcome and some are still working on. So I can't say enough about that. And I don't know if I can put my finger on it in terms of what makes it so special. I think part of it is legitimacy. If someone is referred by you, there's some legitimacy to that, is that I'm going to pay attention because you endorse them. That matters, and that's definitely, part of it. But I don't know. I just feel like it's even bigger than that, because you're not just, and, from what I can see, on your podcast, it's not just editors that you work with. It's not just coaches that you work with. It's all of these other resources that you have, that you are having, part of your network be resources for each other. And that's just tremendous, because I'm telling you, anything that you say, I pay attention to. I'm pretty much endorsed by Pauline, I'm going to check that out, type of thing. So know that I'm your biggest fan, and that's tremendous. I think that's great. That's what people hope that they are building. And sometimes you are able to do that, but sometimes, it's easier said than done type of thing. So that's what I would say are my 2 tips. Take your course and become part of your network.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you so much. I have learned that, academia can be a pretty hostile place. And this community of not exclusively women entrepreneurs, but particularly women entrepreneurs in the online space can be really supportive and really kind. Everybody wants to help each other and, lift each other up. And it's been a trip to experience that amount of kindness and support after being in a place that made me so miserable for so long. So, and I had a lot of colleagues who were great, especially the women that I was in the department with at JU in particular were really fantastic, and are still very close friends. But yeah, to go into the online space and be supported by people, who are further along in their journey than you are is really helpful. So thank you so much for doing this. If anybody wants to hire a mom comedian, a clean mom comedian, or if they want help crafting their personal brand and their marketing, they can find you at wendygillis.com.
Sure can. There's a way to message me through that site. Yep, that's exactly right.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.